we will get started. Hello, everybody. So first, hi, my name is John Levin. I'm a resident in the Hamel Midway neighborhood of St. Paul, and I'm a volunteer at Sustain St. Paul. We'll hear about that a little bit in a moment, but happy to see you all here tonight. It's a very cold night, a lot going on in our community, so just really so happy to see you all here tonight. Thank you for coming out.
Is this my one?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So yeah, welcome to our panel discussion on making the golf course a complete neighborhood, a conversation about the Unidos West Holstead golf course and what the future of that might look like. This is going to be maybe before we get started, just if anybody, the restrooms are out in the hallway there, if anybody needs that. Anything else, Jack? I was going to say anything else about the building, but restaurants are restrooms right here. No restaurants. Maybe restaurants. Everybody needs that. So this project at the golf course is going to be a very large, long-running project. A lot of people and organizations are going to be involved along the way. The University of Minnesota owns the land that the golf course is on right now, and they will be the ones selling it to the developer. The city of Falcon Heights has land use control of the area, so they really are the ones to set out the framework for development in the future. The developer will ultimately buy the land and build out the area, building out the streets and the housing and the commercial buildings, open space, and more. And ultimately, we'll have new residents and businesses will come to grow the city of Falcon Heights, adding their activity, their energy, their tax base along the way. So this is going to be a project that takes decades, potentially, certainly many years. But the work that's going on right now is really important to where that project goes in the future. So along the way, the city of Falcon Heights has really done excellent work over the past several years to prepare for this moment. They've adopted a plan to lay a framework for the city overall and for this area of the city. And last fall, the city formed a visioning committee, conducted a survey, held an open meeting with city residents to get as much input as possible from as many people as possible about what this potential vision could be. And that committee actually created a set of goals and guiding principles for the development of the golf course area that we'll hear about a little bit more in a moment. But before I get to that, I really want to talk a little bit about what the plan is for this evening and how we'll go about this discussion. It's really the goal this evening is really to share ideas about what the future development of the golf course might look like. We want to explore how the details of development are related to the broader goals around housing, around sustainability, and are really around our shared prosperity and our shared livability of our community. So we'll start with some introductory remarks from our co-sponsors. We'll have representatives from the city of Falcon Heights to share a little bit more about those goals and guiding principles that I mentioned. And then we have three great panelists tonight. And they'll each take maybe 10 minutes or so to share their background, their perspectives on the opportunities and the challenges that lie before the community. But then finally, we're going to have time for audience questions and discussion. So that's we really want to make sure we set enough time so that you can actually ask these panelists who have a wealth of experience and knowledge about sort of how communities are built to ask your questions that you have of them. So as I said, there are two co-sponsored organizations for our event tonight. They are Transition Town All St. Anthony Park and Sustain St. Paul. And so first, I just want to give the two sort of co-sponsoring organizations a moment to share a little bit about their organization. So first of all, I'd like Pat Thompson to share a little bit about, who's a member of Transition Town, to share a little bit about Transition Town All St. Anthony Park.
And I think this is on?
Yeah.
Just really briefly, Transition Town All St. Anthony Park is a group of neighbors that is just over the border from here in St. Paul, just south of here. And really briefly, in a nutshell, we work for a very local response to climate change, which means a smaller carbon footprint and a stronger community. And you all probably know about the sale and the probable redevelopment of the Luther Seminary campus that's in our neighborhood in St. Paul. So we are also addressing that, and of course, whether it literally is in the same watershed, I'm not totally sure because I'm not a watershed person, but we kind of see these two pieces of land as part of a larger whole, and so kind of wanted to come and talk with our neighbors up here at Falcon Heights.
And the second co-sponsor organization that is Sustain St. Paul. And just in time, Jacob Huber is the Director of Operations and Advocacy for Sustain St. Paul.
Yes, sorry we're running a touch late. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for having us in Transition Town ASAP. My name is Jacob Hooper. I'm the Director of Advocacy for Sustain St. Paul. For those of you who don't know, Sustain St. Paul is the leading urbanist advocacy organization of St. Paul. It's a C4 nonprofit that champions three things: abundant housing, low carbon transportation, and sustainable land use through education, advocacy, and political action. Now, in plain language, that means we're a group of everyday St. Paul neighbors, residents who envision a future where everyone can afford a place to live, where fast and reliable transit means that it is not a requirement to own a car, and where there is a built density of residents and businesses that makes these goals achievable, especially under our struggling city budget. Our name, Sustain St. Paul, refers not only to environmental sustainability, but also to fiscal sustainability that we seek to build for our city. Now, you may be wondering, then, why an organization sensibly committed to St. Paul would be interested in this development here at Falcon Heights. This is for two reasons. First, because you are our neighbors. At 141 acres, this project is a one-of-a-kind opportunity for the entire metro area. From housing to businesses to green space, this area has incredible potential to add to the urban fabric of this entire northeast metro, in addition to the expanded tax base that it offers you, the city of Falcon Heights specifically. And secondly, because we believe that we have something to offer your community in this. Sustain St. Paul was originally started as Sustain Ward 3 in 2017 in response to the sale of the 122-acre Ford site, which is now known as the Highland Bridge site. They sold that to Ryan Companies, and while some of our neighbors reacted to those changes brought by the development with a lot of fear and concern, instead we pushed the city and the developer to think bigger, more housing, more businesses, and walkability that would benefit both future residents and the entire existing tax base of St. Paul. Now, we didn't get everything we wanted, but we're proud of the impact that we made on that project, and we learned a lot in the process, and we hope that we can share some of that knowledge with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you both. Just to set a few ground rules for this evening, because there are no doubt a lot of different ideas, as many different ideas for the future of the site as there are people in this room. So I would just ask that we try to keep the conversation tonight civil and constructive. No decisions are being made here tonight. No one is trying to win any arguments tonight. We are trying to learn from one another with open minds. So hopefully we can come to the conversation with that. And I will also say, as the panelists are presenting, that I want to try to avoid sort of questions and conversation until the end, until they've all presented. But certainly if you have clarifying questions or definitions of things that you hear, feel free to interrupt to get those answered. But let's hold the sort of main conversation until the panelists have presented. We can sort of hear everything they have to say, and then we'll break into a discussion. So before we get to that, to the panel, I just wanted to introduce Falcon Heights City Administrator, Jack Linehan. Thank you for being here. And he was offered to briefly introduce the city's goals and guiding principles for the golf course site. So thanks, Jack.
Hey, welcome everyone. Can you hear me?
I don't think it's on there.
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry. My name is Jack Linehan, City Administrator for the City of Falcon Heights. Thank you guys all for coming out tonight. Very cold night, lots going on. We appreciate your continued interest in the golf course site. So a little history kind of on the city's involvement in the site. And just kind of another note, we had a couple of city council members who were going to be here. They weren't able to make it, so I'm kind of stepping in and providing some information. We have some members of our planning commission here. that are interested to kind of learn and engage with the community as we go through this process. So starting kind of back in about 2021, the University of Minnesota updated their campus master plan. That was kind of our initial tip-off when they listed the golf course as a opportunity site 1 to 10 years. I started with the city in 2022. We actually, at that time, had started getting some interest from developers that were reaching out looking for sites. And that kind of piqued our concern and our interest in saying, our comprehensive plan, all of our plans have always said this is a golf course. We don't have guidance on what this would look like. And so we undertook a project with the help of Ramsey County. Shout out to our county commissioner, Garrison Lubeck, and have got a grant for the critical corridors to look at kind of our Larpenteur-Snelling corridor. So we want to look at the entire corridor, look at our development opportunities and redevelopment opportunities. And specifically for the golf course, we wanted to engage with the community and start to see what options and what considerations we would want to make if this were developed. So we underwent about a year-long process with the help of a consultant, WSB, engaged in multiple community meetings and gathered online feedback on the site, other sites as well. And that helped us come up with an initial framework if the golf course ever were to be redeveloped. At that time, that was adopted by the City Council in November of 2024. The University of Minnesota at that time made it very clear to us that they had no intention to sell the golf course. We were being premature. And so then June of 2025, they had a call with the University of Minnesota about shortly before it was public that they were going to be going through their first step to dispose of the site. And so that was kind of our start. Beyond that, we really didn't have kind of a heads up this was coming. We had done our initial groundwork. We're glad we did because we're a very small city. I am one of 10 employees full-time in the city of Falcon Heights. And so we want to make sure that we had kind of everything ready to go. So we worked with our planning commission, city council, and over a couple months kind of built out our framework. And that started out, what we really wanted to do is say, what would be our vision? What are our goals of the site? And so the city council and the planning commission had a joint meeting together to kind of talk about what that might look like. And each group appointed 2 members from each body to serve on kind of a visioning group to gather kind of this feedback, guidance. We had a public meeting. A lot of you may have been there. We had over 200 people. This room was packed. And we took all that feedback and helped refine our vision. And so the city came up with essentially 7 goals for this site. Because again, this is a unique opportunity, knowing kind of our past land use look at this. We wanted to really take a look at those different areas, and without getting too much information into it, we looked at connectivity. We want to connect with the neighborhoods. It needs to feel like the rest of the area, both Falcon Heights, but also knowing that it borders Roseville, Lauderdale, and then to the south is University Grove in Falcon Heights, south of that, St. Anthony Park. So we want to have it match kind of our general character. Green space was critically important. That was the most important one that people who were here at the open house indicated that they wanted to see that green space, and we wanted to preserve that. Our city ordinances require 8 to 10% of all subdivision land to be dedicated towards park. But we wanted to see more than that. 8 to 10% is what our park land is. That's for parks. That's park space. But that's not all the open space. If you have 140 acres and you put 14 acres of park, that's great. But what about all the trails, public systems, other stuff that you want to sell? So that was a priority of the city. We wanted to be self-sustaining. As a small city, we have one of the highest, percentages of nonprofit land of any city in Minnesota. 2/3 of Falcon Heights is untaxable between the University of Minnesota and the golf course. And so that means we have 5,200 residents living in about 1 square mile, providing most of our tax base. Very limited commercial. We do have some commercial, but operating is there. So we want to make sure that what we do, this wasn't a speculative site. We weren't going to build a ton of infrastructure hoping that it'll all pay itself off at the end. We're going about that very carefully. We also looked at this as a housing mix. We've prided ourselves at Falcon Heights and kind of our surrounding neighborhoods, higher density, a good mix of different housing types, but there's parts missing. As accessory dwelling units get discussed and other more modern needs in our community are out there, we saw this as an opportunity that this could be a site where we could build this. We also looked at the importance of the sustainability. So we've long prided ourselves for being a small city. We're a green step leader, one of the environmental leaders in in the region for being so small. And we want to continue that. We want to see this as a great opportunity to build that out, have new opportunities there, meet different standards, so we list out those standards. We also saw the use of commercial space. Right now, there's a maybe the panelists will get into this, a little bit of a upside down with the commercial market, but we still see the need. We need commercial development in the city to help sustain our tax base and some of our other goals. And then also developmental funding. We want to be pretty clear that we'll continue to look for grants, other opportunities, but the developer should be responsible for these costs. They should be the one that would be fronting those costs, and so we made that clear to the development community. And so these guiding principles were included as part of the RFP. Might get into a little bit more, but the RFP officially closed from the U of M on December 18th, and this is the official, what I can share. They received multiple submissions, and they are reviewing those submissions at the time being, expecting that they will bring forward a recommendation to the city sometime this spring or summer. So that's a little bit of information we have.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Jack. All right, with no further ado, we'll get on to our panel. We have three great panelists this evening. They each have very different backgrounds and perspectives on this important project. I'll introduce all three of them, and then we'll have them launch into their presentations. So Representative Larry Kraft has served as a Minnesota State Representative since January of 2023. Before that, he was an at-large City Council member for the City of St. Louis Park for 3 years. From 2014 to 2019, Representative Kraft led the national nonprofit iMatter, which supported high school and middle school youth leaders as they pressed local governments to take action on climate change. One youth-led campaign in St. Louis Park resulted in the most aggressive city climate action plan in Minnesota. Just before iMatter, Representative Kraft left 25-year high-tech business career to focus on climate change. And he wanted us to include that he's also a high school medic.
Not much of that today.
Yeah. Why not? Every day is a good ice cream day. Spencer Miller Johnson, to Representative's left, is a senior city planner with the City of St. Paul, where he administers the master plan and code for Highland Bridge and leads other long-range zoning reform projects. Spencer serves on the board of directors for the Congress for New Urbanism, a national nonprofit that champions walkable urbanism and aims to build places people love. Before his current job, Spencer worked for 10 years in California with national planning and zoning experts before returning to his native Twin Cities. And Mike Hirabayashi is a volunteer with Unidos St. Paul, which works for equitable clean energy access. An example of that work is the network geothermal heating and cooling being built into the Heights development in the northeast corner of St. Paul. Unidos' clean energy work also includes existing buildings and other new buildings in St. Paul. And so with that, those introductions, I think we'll begin. And so Representative Kraft, it's the mic is yours.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. Can you hear me okay? Fantastic. Well, so why am I here tonight? You heard my background. I didn't say much about housing and their land use or zoning. As was mentioned, I had a 25-year career in high tech. And then I have two kids. My kids are now in college. But when they were younger, my wife and I were starting to put away money for them for school. And I was digging into climate change and just became absolutely terrified about the future that we were going to live in. And so I decided, I want to try to do something about it. So I made a shift. I wound up running this national nonprofit for about 5 years that worked with high school and middle school students. And we supported kids all around the country, but some great success emanated out from my own community of St. Louis Park. And as was mentioned, there were students that went before our city council and initiated the process there that led to the adoption of our climate action plan in February of 2018. That plan remains the most aggressive city plan in Minnesota. I then wound up merging that nonprofit in with another one and decided that the way I could have the biggest impact on this issue was to try to implement and be part of the implementation of this plan that the students had initiated. And that was my platform, implementing the plan, keeping youth involved, strengthening the diversity of the community. So I won, served on city council for 3 years, and then this seat opened up. So I am in the Minnesota House. I am the FL Vice Chair of the Energy Committee. I am the co-chair of the House Climate Action Caucus. I'm an assistant leader in the House, and I'm on the campaign side. I'm the co-chair of our Finance Committee. So again, still, you haven't heard anything about housing and land use, have you? So my connection to this was a couple of things. One is, when I was out door knocking in my community, running for this office, I can't tell you how many times I heard from someone, well, I've lived here for 30 years, for 40 years, but I couldn't afford my house today. Or, you know, my kids would like to live here, but they can't afford it. They've got to live farther and farther away. Or people working in the community, working that couldn't afford to live there. So that was one, that really became realizing how important housing and affordable housing is as a foundational element to prosperity and to really sustainable life. Then, early on in my career, I heard this podcast of something that happened in Washington, and it was about statewide zoning reform. And that really caused me to think about what's happening in Minnesota. And as I dug into it here in Minnesota, our situation is that we're short about 100,000 homes. And the result of that, it's not that hard to figure out, is that housing prices are going up and up. Rental prices, home ownership, you name it. At this point in time, the median income of any metro area in Minnesota cannot afford the median house. Let that sink in, right? So, we have to build a lot more housing. And we need to, I think, on the other side, I think we need to invest more in affordable housing, but we can only put enough, if we have to fight uphill all the time against a widening gap of affordable, the prices of homes and what people can afford, we can't subsidize our way out of this. We have to get the market working for us. And so I've been working on housing bills for the past several years. It's a tough issue. We have both bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition to create some housing, some statewide zoning reform. I will tell you, I believe we're going to pass it this year. But the concept there is where we build housing is really important. If we allow housing to be built further and further away and sprawl further and further out, not only is it going to pave over more forests, more farmland, right? But the number one thing that is taking farmland out of production is development. Not only is it going to do that, but it's going to dramatically impact our transportation greenhouse gas emissions, because we're going to force people to drive more and more. And the number one source of greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota and the country, transportation emissions. And the largest part of that are passenger vehicles. So, that where we build, how we use land is just critical to achieving what we need to from a climate perspective. But let's put climate to the side, right? Which when I present this with some folks that may not have the same views as I do on this stuff, let's put climate to the side. Doing land use in the right way, so we all have to drive a little bit less to live our lives, reduces something called vehicle miles traveled. Minnesota has a goal of reducing vehicle miles traveled 20% per capita by 2050. If we do that, it will save $91 billion for Minnesotans. By 2050, over $5 billion a year. That comes from the cost of cars. Cars cost a lot, so you have to drive less. That saves a bunch of money. It comes from things like people will be a bit healthier, right? So they're not walking a bit. It comes from less asthma and stuff. And the other thing it comes from is from less people dying on our roads. Turns out dying is not economically really a good thing. But really, we have about 400 people a year that die on our roads. So if we can set our land use up, structure up, so we can live our lives and have to drive a little bit less over time. It has so many benefits. So that's what brought me to this. The kind of legislation we're working on basically is to ask cities to say, look, we need to intelligently put density in the right places. So we will be asking cities to pick certain, some portion of their community to both allow a bit more density from a residential perspective, maybe ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, things like that. Pick portions of their commercial areas where they will allow multifamily units or mixed use to be there as well. To do things like make process easier. One of the things that drives up housing costs are process, right? That each city does things a little bit differently, and anything besides a single family home is a special. What we want to do is take it so that a bit more stuff isn't a special. Right? So try to put in place some systemic changes to improve land use and drive down the cost of housing over time. So as I listen to the opportunity you all have with this space, it's pretty exciting. I'm sure there's tons of different, visions and opportunities and stuff, but it is a phenomenally exciting opportunity that can help address affordability for so many people, can help address your tax base, and to do it in the right way can help be part of a climate solution. So I'm excited to be here, happy to answer any questions, and look forward to hearing from the actual experts in this.
Great. Thank you so much. That's great. All right, we'll go to Spencer.
Okay, thank you all. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Representative. I don't know if I call myself an expert yet, but I'm trying to get there. Again, my name's Spencer. I work for the City of St. Paul, and I realize now that you have a lot of St. Paul representation up here on this dais tonight, and at least it's not my goal to impose St. Paul on you all today. I'm not here on my official capacity at my day job. I'm just kind of here more for fun and to talk to you all, to learn what Falcon Heights needs, and to also hopefully offer some insight into what I think it could be. I do live down the street on the Roseville side, so I also am not far away, and I'm over here all the time. So just want to level set on that too. Of course, I feel like I need to acknowledge that our community is being terrorized outside the walls, so I just want to level set on that as well. It's insane what's going on outside here, and it can be difficult to talk about what kind of a beautiful neighborhood this could be when so many of our neighbors are being attacked. At the same time, I've often said for years that to be a city planner, you have to inherently kind of be an optimist. You have to inherently kind of see hope in what a place could look like and envision a beautiful future even after I'm, dead and gone. So I'm really trying to hold on to that tonight, and I hope that we can have some good discourse about what kind of a site this could be and how beautiful the neighborhood it could be, and really put on my optimist hat there. I think my objective, and I do have some slides and some pictures that thank you, Pat, and I'll kind of walk through.
But I put the first one.
Perfect, that's a great place to start. I really wanted to just start by kind of just challenging, I guess my whole thing tonight is to challenge just the idea of density. I think when people talk about housing density, especially in North America, you probably picture like a 4 or 5 story multifamily building. And there's so much in the density spectrum between a single family house and a large 4 or 5 story or even larger, building. And that, for whatever reason, I'm not an expert, I'm not a developer, but for whatever reason, there's a lot of developers who don't believe that it can pencil to build 2 to 12 to 14 units of housing at that sort of moderate scale. Again, I'll have to talk to my developer friends about that one, but what I can at least do is get our wheels turning about what that could look like. Because at the end of the day, I think that density can be super beautiful, and if the neighborhood is well designed, if the public realm and urban design is right, and if the buildings are designed in a creative way, there's an opportunity to hit a lot of the points that the representative was just talking about, and also give back to the community in a way that would be really enriching for generations to come. So I have some examples. Hopefully you can all see them. I'll have to crane my neck a little bit to walk
Yeah, I don't
through
know what
them.
happened with the other one.
That's fine.
We're giving up on it.
I'm back and forth. These to me are just going to be some photos of what I think could work. You can disagree with me, but hopefully it again challenges what you think about related to density. And a lot of these too focus on something that I think is super important. To me, we should really be focusing on not the separation of land use when we're thinking about the site, we should be aware of steering clear of an area that's for single-family homes and an area that's for multifamily homes, and then we should put all the commercial in Carpenter. Like, there's so much more nuance to actually get a livable, walkable, successful neighborhood than that. And again, if the design is right and the grid is right, then the use within those buildings and the kind of experience that they provide matters a lot less. So this example here it's called Prairie Queen. It's just outside of Omaha, Nebraska. It's a 50-acre site, so smaller than what we're talking about here. But every building in Prairie Queen it's currently being built. Every building in Prairie Queen is a house scale building, 2 to 8 units. So there's not a single family house and there's not a large multifamily building, but they all are multi-unit buildings at a house scale or a neighborhood scale. So just this shot down the street, you can see that several of the buildings look just like big houses, right? But there are multiple units within each of them. And they range. The one that's on the left kind of in the middle is a duplex. And then the one that's on the right kind of in the middle is a sixplex. So you can see that they complement each other. And they look, of course, design subjective, so again, feel free to disagree with me, but they don't look too bad. So a lovely neighborhood to walk around, you just get a few more units in it, and a creative way to design. You can go to the next slide. These are more building types in Prairie Queen. So both of those are 4-unit buildings, and they have great kind of presence on the street. They have good construction materials, high quality construction materials, and they offer both a connection to the street and the neighborhood, and still remain just at 2 stories, right? The next slide shows one of the larger buildings. So this looks kind of like a mansion, right? But it's got 6 units. You can see the little chimneys in the roof. 6 units in there. So that, in previous eras may have been one person's house, or it may have been designed to be one person's house, but in a development like Prairie Queen, it's got 6 units in there. And these sorts of developments are so, in terms of new construction, are so unique these days. Like, you, as a younger person, who's in the past few years looked for housing and been interested in living in walkable neighborhoods, this is completely the type of housing that I know, like me and many of my peers are looking for, but you can't find. I don't need all the amenities and cool and gym of a giant, place in the north. And I would love to live right here in something like that. And then the next slide shows, this is more of Prairie Queen's mixed-use building types. They don't have much of this. This is mostly a residential neighborhood, and I think maybe this is the only one built today. But this is what we call live-work. So it's a live-work building, and they can almost be sold off like townhouses. So like each individual kind of vertical facade essentially is a unit, and the bottom floor is commercial space. So it could be like an office, it could be a really small retail shop, and the floors above are a residential unit. The idea is that someone would purchase that unit, including both the residential and commercial space, and they'd operate the commercial space and live above it. So the reason I wanted to show this, I like this, and again, I don't know if this is like exactly right for here, but this idea of live work is fantastic because it can really roll with market trends and changes. So that ground floor commercial space could be an office for an architect. It could be a small place where you have candle making classes or something. But it will always be very neighborhood scale, and it is always it's very flexible, flex space that can be leased out in different ways. So that's just one concept that I think is worth considering. We can go on to Prairie Queen now.
Quick question over
Yep.
your list.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You're talking about units, but you're not saying how many bedrooms are in a unit.
Sure. Yeah. In Prairie Queen, they range from studio to 3-bedroom. So I don't know. Can you hear me? Okay? So it can depend. It just depends on the different building types. If you're interested in the specific unit counts and some of the building types, I can follow up with that information. But it depends on the different buildings.
But they up to 3 bedrooms. They were up to 3 bedrooms.
So it's not going to handle a big family then.
Yeah, good question.
So far.
We do have local examples of this too. Now, we don't have a 50-acre site of new construction of these beautiful creative building types yet. But we do have a lot of infill development in Twin Cities that already kind of gives us a glimpse into sort of local context that could be achieved. So I'll just explain each one of these. So the top left image is called Sundial. It's in the Kingfield. I'm sorry,
Can you speak up?
Sure.
It's really hard to hear.
I'm sorry. Is my mic on? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So the top left image it's called Sundial. It's in the Kingfield neighborhood of Minneapolis. It's brand new construction, brick masonry building, 12 units. I love this example because it looks like so many of the multi-unit buildings that Twin Cities already have in our neighborhoods, but all of those were built pre-World War II. And then we've got Sundial that was just, completed last year. Sorry about that. So, like I said, 12 units. It leased out instantly. It's a very popular it was very popular. So it's a walk-up building in a walkable neighborhood. And offers, again, a glimpse into new construction, brick masonry. The top right image is called the Otto. It's in Dinkytown. It's 2 6-unit buildings. So again, we're at 12 units there, but they splice that up, right, between 2 6-unit buildings. It's more of a modern design, so again, it's subjective. If you don't like it, that's fine. I don't know if I love it, but the point is, it's different unit counts in buildings that are still only 3 stories and might have a better relationship to neighboring houses than what you would conventionally think of for multifamily buildings. The bottom left image is called Ewing Place. That's just a block off 50th and France on the Minneapolis side. That has more of a large building mass on the street, as you can tell, so a little bit different sort of presentation on the street than the top 2 images. But it's 15 units, and it's still only 3 stories. So I like that example just because you get a few more units out of it without going higher in height. And a lot of times the sticking point when we're talking about what would be context sensitive or neighborhood scale is height. And a lot of times that when you get over 3 stories, 3.5 stories, at least in St. Paul, sometimes that can be more controversial. And then the bottom right is just a duplex, but it looks like a house. So 2 units for the price of 1. Excellent. Yeah.
The previous slide you just showed us,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any idea what the costs are of those? The rent?
The question is about cost.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I didn't look up the costs for those. I can look into that though if you want to give my contact info after. Thanks. This slide is a bunch of ADUs, so accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units are like the low-hanging fruit of getting additional housing density in our neighborhoods. Many communities in the metro, not just Minneapolis and St. Paul, but especially inner-ring suburbs, allow accessory dwelling units by right in their residential zoning districts. I'm not sure if Falcon Heights does. I didn't look that up. But these are all in St. Paul, except I think the bottom one's not, but the others are in St. Paul. And they offer a way to get 1 more unit, usually at the rear of lots, where you normally just have 1 unit, now you have 2, right? A lot of times in the Twin Cities, they're built over garages. So that's what all these examples show. And many neighbors don't even realize that they're there. It's just a very gentle way to have additional density. And that can be for the property owner to lease out to someone, but it can also just be an opportunity for aging in place. Generational housing, so mother-in-law suite type of situation. So a great opportunity to provide flexibility for the property owners of the area that you're in. For this neighborhood, again, this is to me kind of like an easy win. It could provide a little bit of extra density for a big effect. Okay, hard pivot into Highland Bridge. I wanted to bring up Highland Bridge just because I work on it, and I think because of its acreage, it's a good comp to the site that we're talking about tonight. Highland Bridge, thanks for doing a primer on it, in St. Paul. It was 122 acres. We kind of absorbed, long story, 13 more into it. So it sits officially at 135 acres. And the site we're talking about tonight is 141, I believe. So similar acreage, right? Obviously, Highland Bridge is a bit of a different context. It's along the Mississippi River. For those that don't know, it's where Ford Motor Companies operated their manufacturing facility for 90 years. That closed in 2011. And then the city embarked on a 10-year outreach phase that concluded in a master plan and code that would build out the neighborhood. So this example, I think, is worth talking through briefly, but might be of a greater density and intensity than you may be thinking about here, so I don't want to scare anybody. It's down the road, and I think it's worth mentioning. I really like this site plan because it shows how you can break up these large sites into a grid and block network. It's walkable grid and block network, a variety of housing types, and the other thing that Highland Bridge has that I think folks may be interested in hearing here at Falcon Heights is that it has 55 acres of parkland. So 135 acre site with 55 acres of parkland, so that was a huge priority of the master plan. There's the manufacturing facility. Many of you may remember this. That image is from 2006. And then the next slide shows image similar vantage point of just a couple of years ago as build out occurs. And again, this is still a couple years old, so there's actually been a lot of construction since then. But you can see some of the street network going in and some of the private development starting. The other kind of interesting takeaway about Highland Bridge that I'll mention is that the implementation, the actual development, was phased in a pretty creative way, such that it allowed the streets, so the public infrastructure, and the parks to open first, so that neighbors could start to orient themselves with the site and get used to it and start to enjoy it. So people started going to pickleball and taking their dogs to the dog park and actually incorporating it into part of the neighborhood. Private development then began around it and continues to this day, will for probably the next decade. But I thought that was a really smart placemaking strategy, because not only to orient people with the site, but to also think of it as an opportunity for people who may want to live there, who may enjoy going to the parks and may want to move into one of the housing types eventually. Yep. This is my last slide. This just shows a few more images of Highland Bridge. So again, maybe a bigger density than you're thinking about here, but the top left image is called Marvella. That's a 5-story, 200 and something unit senior housing facility that has, it's well constructed, it's well designed, but maybe a bigger building type than what you're thinking. The bottom left image are the Highland Bridge row homes. So these are pretty big, like townhouses, and they're alley loaded, but they offer a good example of some of the housing variety that Highland Bridge has to offer. And then the image on the right is what we kindly call the central stormwater feature, because we haven't come up with a better name yet. But that's what it is. It is essentially a stormwater retention pool, but it was designed to be an amenity and an asset to the site. And that's another, maybe my last, well, we'll see, potentially last takeaway to think about for our site tonight, is that stormwater and these public infrastructure needs can be resources, amenities, and should be thought of as such. This central stormwater feature is so cool. If you haven't been over there, maybe not tonight or tomorrow, but sometime this spring, go down there and walk along it. It really reads like a riverwalk promenade. It's very well programmed, but it is immensely there for utility. And I actually kind of accidentally ended up there during this massive storm in June, and was like, well, I'm soaked, I'm just going to go see how the stormwater feature's doing. And it was just working so beautifully. It was so cool to see. It's designed to flood in a really beautiful way, and it offsets into the Mississippi River as it needs to. But in not rain events, it is designed to be a place where you can walk along and sit and enjoy the beautiful weather we sometimes have.
Did the housing developer develop that?
So great question. The question was, did the housing developer develop the central stormwater feature? So for Highland Bridge, we have a master developer, that Ryan Companies, and they did all the public infrastructure in collaboration with the city, the public infrastructure work. So they were the lead on designing and building the stormwater feature. And they have sold off different portions of the land to other developers to get kind of a variety of architectural styles and different housing types around the site. But they are like the primary leaseholder of the property. So we worked in partnership with them to figure out a way to front load the funding for the infrastructure for the site so that so we can pull something like this off in the first place. And then as development comes online, they buy into it. So they pay like a fee to buy into the district-wide utilities. Yeah.
Maybe a specific question, but did the city of St. Paul participate in offsetting some of the development costs to basically subsidize the commercial, like retail components of that? Or was there sort of a help from the city side to make a mixed use community work?
Great question. Yes, so this is within a TIF district. So
You
Jackson.
want to repeat that, a little bit of that, Spencer?
Yep. Okay. Yep. So the question was about the funding structure, basically at the site. And to be honest, I'm not an expert. I'm just a little city planner. I didn't help figure out the funding stack for this project. So I don't know all the details, but and it's quite complicated. But this is within a TIF district, a tax increment financing district. So the tax that's generated on the site goes back into the site first and foremost for the next couple decades before it gets relinquished to the city.
So it's a TIF district.
Correct. Highlandburg was incorporated as a TIF district. Yeah.
So 26 years it'll be.
Correct.
The future value of the pictures you're showing will not be realized by the city for 26 years. Correct? Property tax wise in terms of what goes into the general fund?
That's correct. So the site will generate the taxes that were generated when Ford operated the plant. So those baseline taxes continue in the general fund. And then for the next 26 years, as the project gets built out, the additional tax revenue on top of that that's generated goes back into the site. And that's how we fund something like this, like the central stormwater feature and some of this public infrastructure at the outset of a project, so that we can benefit from that and then in the long run benefit from the tax structure. But it's a complicated thing. It's not right for every site, and I'm not an expert in TIF, but it's every site is determined differently whether or not it's a good candidate for a TIF district.
Let me just add something on. Everything you said was correct in terms of TIF districts. There's a state statute of how long they can be open, but very often, like in St. Louis Park, we've used quite a bit of TIF, and pretty rarely does the district does it take the full time that the district can be open to pay back the actual TIF note. So it varies by district, but sometimes some of them take 10 years, some take 15, some take 20. So it might not be this is all, who knows how this is going to be structured, but the 26 is how long the maximum it can be open for.
Yes, and I'm glad in St. Louis Park that they're retired. St. Paul has a history of renewing TIF districts for pooling for future affordable housing. So that's a concern for me as a resident looking at a property of this size.
And this will be a really, I appreciate your bringing this up, and it'll be a really important, question for the city to grapple with as it thinks about how it wants to proceed, with development in the future. So this is great. I want to keep us moving,
Thanks.
but thank you.
Thanks for fielding my questions,
Sure.
guys. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks. That wraps me up, but you can do any later.
Yes, we'll definitely have time for Q&A, but I want to give Mike a chance to share some of his thoughts as well. Thanks, Spencer. Okay.
He doesn't want to open mic.
That's cool. Hi, I'm Mike Hirabayashi. I'm a volunteer with Unidos, a group that advocates for equitable clean energy access, immigrant rights, and workers' rights. I was on the Climate Advisory Board for the Heights development a few years back, and was heavily involved with this process to make sure it had a geothermal network on it.
I can't open the first image.
Oh, okay. That's fine. These first three images are just concept images that they generated for the Heights. It's, your use of them may vary. So the Heights was a long involved process that had a share of bumps along the road. But we did find that geothermal networks are the most efficient, longest lasting, and cheapest to maintain option for new construction sites by far. So we, with a lot of advocacy, we did eventually get it done, and the Heights is a geothermal networked site, and it is a net zero site. It's my hope that whatever's done at the Falcon site, that they too go with making a network geothermal system in it. Now the Heights is a very comparable for the golf course that you guys have here. The Heights is a 112-acre redevelopment of the Hillcrest Golf Club in the heart of the St. Paul's Greater East Side. With that one, the St. Paul Port Authority and its partners are in the process of constructing 1,000 housing units, 1 million square feet of light industrial space with a carbon neutral infrastructure. So it's a mixed-use site overall. It's going to have a combination of affordable housing units, businesses, and green spaces to make a very vibrant, sustainable community. This site has been an inspiration for other developments, and which we are very much using for many other sites throughout St. Paul. It joins an ever-growing list of sites in St. Paul that have network geothermal systems in them, like the Johnson High School, the Pipefeeders Local 455 Training Center, the North End Rec Center, the Cardinal Village Retirement Home, and many, many more that are currently in construction development. I'll go ahead and flag that one thing I found while being on that advisory panel is that if any kind of golf course they use toxic chemicals throughout those for decades, including heavy amounts of mercury. Any use you're going to have on that site whatsoever is going to require the soil to be dug up about 5 feet deep. It all needs to go. Unfortunately, that also means that all the trees on there and stuff needs to be replaced. Now, what they did in the Heights is that they replaced those 2 to 1. So they planted new trees after they bulldozed and got all that out of there. And because it was so toxic, the trees themselves were so toxic, they couldn't bring them into other areas without contaminating those areas with mercury and stuff. So unfortunately, it's going to be a loss. And I'll go ahead and warn everyone here. I didn't realize this until I was on that committee in the Heights project. It is not safe to really do stuff on. I have heard that there's a lot of people like running high school teams and stuff through there, and like you should not bring your pets there. Definitely not your dogs or anything like that. It is very toxic. So ultimately, that if it's going to be used for anything, including people just using it residentially, you need to dig that soil out of there, about 5 feet deep. So that's just something I wanted to flag there. Now, what is, if you go to the last slide, yeah. But so, what is a network geothermal system? A network geothermal systems are a kind of renewable green technology that can provide heating and cooling at unprecedented levels of efficiency. Once installed, they last for decades with minimal maintenance, making them extremely cheap and efficient in the long run. The only stipulation to that, the only downside to them is that they do come up with a pretty high upfront cost, but they pay off for that in the long run and by far in spades. And they are increasingly becoming kind of one of the key options to help. They're increasingly becoming options to help up with that upfront cost, including some developers that specialize in handling the upfront costs of green projects. There's also many organizations like Fresh Energy and many kind of banks that specialize in getting the fundings available so that these green projects can be developed, especially handling the upfront costs. Now, how does geothermal network work? How it works is that when you drill down to the ground, there is a point where the ground temperature is always 55 degrees. Geothermal networks drill small wells down into that level and install pipes that go down and come back up, forming a loop. You can kind of see on the kind of energy station site there, that's kind of the main, these are the wells that get drilled. Those pipes go down, water runs through it, and the water changes temperatures as it moves around and goes throughout the system. The other pipes then get connected to this loop, and at the level that's about the same level that natural gas pipes usually get installed at. These pipes go out to homes and buildings and form a network of pipes that lead to a processing unit in the basement of each of the homes or somewhere in the buildings. These processing units, or I should say water goes through these pipes when they're installed, and water moving through them changes temperatures as it's going through the system, and the units process the water it's going through. This you may call these like chain exchangers. This changing of temperatures produces both energy and also gets used for heating and cooling buildings. And because it's always 55 degrees, the water always gets reset to a temperature of 55 degrees at the bottom of the well. Therefore, it can be used for cooling when it's hot outside in the summer, and it can be used for heating when it's cold outside. And then in the winter, the water is, well, yeah, I guess I kind of really want to go over that. So the water is warmer than the temperature on the surface. In the summer, it's cooler than the surface temperature. The units in the basement homes or inside the buildings process this and provide this heating and cooling system with a little bit of electricity at an extremely efficient rate. This is why once they're installed, they're incredibly cheap to maintain. They're incredibly cheap to run. They take almost no maintenance. They last for forever. I was in the Excel's pilots programs that they proposed for Minnesota. The geothermal networks, they have a glowing recommendation for them. And they'd always have the lifetime span for each of the different technologies that they use. The geothermal networks were by far the longest lasting, most efficient, the ones that the engineers were most excited about. So the main method that these geothermal networks need to kind of power this and where the wells are at is called an anchor site. Geothermal network needs this anchor site to have the wells get drilled down and where the main system is processed. The anchor site needs to be a relatively large energy user, such as a business, a warehouse, a church, a school, or a similar kind of a building. In order to make an effective and efficient geothermal network, there needs to be something like 300 to 700 tons of heating in the system total. Now, the average home needs about 3 to 4 tons of heat. Therefore, to make the more heating that the anchor site needs, the fewer homes need to be in the system in order to make it feasible. And once it's not like that's an upper cap either. Once a system is feasible, you can add more wells, you can add more heat generation to it, it just connect more pipes to it, and it's very easy to expand out and connect more homes too. You just need, the expensive part is the drilling the wells in the first place. And if you need to drill wells later on to expand it even further, then that's going to cost there. But the more you can get that decided in the beginning, the more cheaper the overall cost will be. And also if the anchor site generates heat in some way, then that heat could be captured instead of using geothermal heat or in order to reduce the number of wells that need to be drilled. For instance, a laundromat or a waste processor can produce a lot of heat in the course of their normal business, and that heat can be captured. We're working in the HAMS site area to create geothermal systems, and there's a co-op laundromat that is a prime candidate, and it's a co-op too, so we're working with them to hopefully get a geothermal system set in, and because they generate so much heat with the laundromat, they don't need as many wells drilled, which drastically reduces the upfront cost. And now I should mention that the term geothermal energy or thermal energy is a fairly broad category that includes things like heat capture, air source heat pumps, and etc. So when I'm talking about how fantastically efficient the system is, I'm talking about a geothermal network that involves these drilled wells with the water running through the pipes. There are things like air source heat pumps that are far less efficient, that use the outside temperature instead of the ground, water running through ground pipes. Those, because the air temperature changes so drastically and that a different kind of temperature needs to be changed over, it's a lot less efficient, but it's also much cheaper to install. So it can make use on like individual homes. Like if you have a neighbor who installs some geothermal in their house, it's probably an air source heat pump. They're still good, but it's just not anywhere near as efficient as this geothermal network that I'm talking about. So with the cost of network geothermal, there are 4 main things that determine its upfront cost: drilling wells, laying piping, internal machinery in the buildings, and weatherizing homes. However, the cost of drilling wells and laying piping can be significantly reduced if the land or roads are being torn up anyway, such as during road reconstruction or lead pipe replacement programs, things like that. In St. Paul, we're very much trying to piggyback a lot of these geothermal networks made into these programs, where the roads are going to be torn up anyway. Also, if there's a new construction site, like at the Heights or at this golf course, that is a prime time. You're going to save a lot of money. If a geothermal network is installed now, it's going to be drastically cheaper than if it's installed in the future. The number of wells that need to be drilled can be reduced if the anchor site generates enough heat for effective heat capture. In addition, there is one developer that does specialize in using member investors to help take care of a lot of the upfront costs of green energy projects, such as solar panel farms that have recently gotten into making geothermal networks. We have been partnering lately a lot with Cooperative Energy Futures, which had worked a lot of times with Unidos, and St. Paul 3 before we became Unidos. They're a co-op that have cultivated a great number of community members, investors, and Cooperative Futures that use their funds to take care of the upfront costs of viable projects and recoup their investment by collecting a small percentage of the revenue from the produced energy over the course of their contract, which is, I believe, about 25 years. And one of the things that's happening with a site that we're working on in the Midway is that they're going to be installing a geothermal network, and from the buildings there that's going to provide energy and heating and cooling to the surrounding neighbors. But also they're going to be installing solar panels on that. When you combine, because geothermal networks do not take up a lot of electricity, but does require some electricity. But that electricity is being caused by the solar panels on top of that is incredible savings. That makes it very, very cheap. In fact, you're likely going to be generating a profit on the overall energy generated, which can be sold to other communities. There's at the Heights, they established a nonprofit that runs the geothermal system, and that nonprofit can sell energy out and provide heating and cooling to neighbors and people in the area. A similar thing can be done with this site as well. Yeah, that is everything what I have. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Okay, so I know we'll have, I'm sure there's well, give me 1 second. Is it a clarification question, or is it a?
This is actually relevant to what your presentation said.
Okay.
Thank you for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, give me 1 second here, because I'll start with you, because I saw your hand up, but I just want to sort of maybe lay out the discussion here, and then I'll start with you, and then we'll do other questions.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So give me 1 second. So thank you, first of all, panelists, for great presentations. They're all very different, which is awesome. I'm sure folks have a lot of questions. I know you're ready. So we've got about half an hour for discussion and questions. So yeah, we'll start with you, ma'am, with a question.
Hi. So relevant to this property, the golf course, West Boston. Are there any engineering core samples of the soil at present to understand the level of contamination, soil contamination, that would impact development there? This is important. I think geothermal thing is great, great presentation, but I think it's relevant to this entire population to know all of us to know what the level of contamination in the soil is as far as future development, and what intelligence or understanding core samples do you guys have? I know what soil engineering core samples look like. So has anybody done that yet? Or has the university allowed you to do that?
So personally, I'm coming as a volunteer.
Can I ask if Jack can answer the question?
I think so. This panel really is not specifically experts on this specific site. I think the panel is really talking in more general terms about sort of what's happening. But it's of course a really excellent question when you get the specifics of this site. I will give Jack, if you had any knowledge or comments you wanted to make here, that it may be a good question for the future too.
Yeah, thank you. So a little bit on the environmentals of the site. So that's going to be some of the continued due diligence as they go through this process. They have started a phase 1, and so if you look at the RFP, it's publicly available for some of the information. They do have some of the initials. results, but they're gonna continue that analysis through this process. It'll be a multi-year due diligence as they go through the closing. That's part of the closure of the golf course in 2026, is to allow for this more invasive sampling. And so that's their goal. As part of this too, one of the city's responsibilities is we are essentially the environmental review of that. And so what we would do is either a process known as an EAW, an environmental activity
Assessment
worksheet, or AUAR. It's been a while since I've said this, a couple of years. But essentially looking at kind of how it works into the urban land area. So it's going to be a process. The city's hired, we're working with Bolton & Mink. We hired them as our engineering consultants in December. They're bringing in a couple of sub-consultants that have expertise, Braun Intertech, to assist with the environmental reviews and all the testing and kind of our processing of that. And then they'll also be working with bar engineering for stormwater and other considerations. So the long story is it's still part of the future in the process of this, but they have done some information. As part of the RFP, there's about 870 pages of environmental data that was included as part of the used RFP. And some of that may answer some of your questions, but I would recommend to continue to watch that process as it moves forward.
Is that on a
Thank you,
website?
appreciate that.
It's still up, yeah.
I will go ahead and say that in general, the golf courses in Minnesota use a ton of mercury. It was just very much what they did back in the day. I did hear some comments on the Port Authority that basically, yeah, all golf courses have just toxic levels of mercury pretty deep down. It sounded like pretty much all of them would require, about the similar kinds of uprooting of the soil and replacing.
What did they use it for?
You mean the golf courses back in the day?
Why did they use
Why mercury?
Like, I can't quite get into their heads exactly what they. Well, anyway, they thought that it was good for the grass, made it look nice, made it look like crisp. And pesticides. It was a part of pesticides, and they thought it made it look the grass nice.
I just looked it up, it was against snow mold.
Oh, so
Okay, thank you.
So
For the win. All right, so question.
John is going to be running this meeting and people are going to listen to John. And I'm going to whip you if you don't.
I know there's a lot of questions, and so I'm going to try to keep things somewhat in order, but I'm not going to be perfect at it, so I'm also going to ask you to help me with the order here, but go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, just a cautionary tale. The last time the university sold a large tract of land with Rosemont,
Huh.
they said they were going to do a big sustainable community.
Right.
About 2 or 3 years later, they came back and said, well, I guess not. So you have to watch it.
Oh, I'll jump in there. I will also point out that's a big reason for continued advocacy. There were plenty of times with the Heights project where they said, well, we looked at it, never geothermal, but it's not going to work out. And then we pushed back. We did a little bit more organizing, and we got more information knowledge, and then it got revived again. Went on for a little while. Oh, we had some more hiccups. Well, and so we kind of rolled up our sleeves. These are more hiccups that need to be solved. So if it's you or if it's anywhere that says, okay, we're just going to make it a good, sustainable site, you're going to have to keep up with that. You're going to have to hold them accountable for that, because are going to be people along the way or bumps along the roads that aren't going to necessarily have a follow through. You gotta keep pushing to make that follow through happen.
The Ford site had similar sort of dynamics. It required ongoing advocacy every step of the way.
Yep.
So just be ready for that.
Which is part of the reason that we're here tonight. I mean, part of the reason here tonight is just to all learn more about what's possible, and to kind of help everybody sort of learn how to talk about these things and learn how to express what your interests are. So the question here, and I'm going to go back there.
So first of all, I'm Tucker Levine, I just live on the other side of University.
Can you stand up?
Grantham. I want to thank all of you, first of all, for your very thoughtful comments and presentations and your insight. I think that you clarified something important for me, but maybe you could comment a little further, and that's about the relationship going forward. You've got the university, they're interested in selling the property, and they want to make as much as possible. You've got the developers, of course, who also want to do something, I hope, that most of us will actually be comfortable with and enthusiastic about. They want to make money. And you got the city of Falcon Heights. So does Falcon Heights have the right of first refusal if the university brings a plan forward that you don't think is going to work?
So for the city, we control the zoning once it leaves the university's hands. So the U, as part of the land grant institution, they do have a lot of control over kind of the use of the site. They have their own internal permitting. When they build sites, we find out about it usually kind of secondhand and later. But for this, where it does come into the consideration, if it sells and it changes hands, our underlying zoning on all university properties is R1 residential, which is single family. So if any developer wants to do anything beyond that, or if they want to subdivide the lots, so if they don't want to have one massive golf course, or I think it's a couple parcels, they do have to go through the city's planning commission process and then eventually the city's council. And so the U understands that. They have been working with us through this process, understanding that, we eventually, what their goal is if they, let's say they went out and took the highest best offer. They go through this, a multi-year contingency as they go through their due diligence. If it ends up failing at that point, because they were not in lockstep with the city of Falcon Heights and our vision and our other goals for this site, it could be a failed planning commission case, and they would have spent significant sum on kind of time, staff time, energy, to have a failed project. And so they have a vested interest in making sure that what they propose matches the vision and the future comprehensive plan amendments that the city would understand.
Very helpful. And one very brief follow-up. Did you say, gentlemen on that far end here, that every tree would have to be removed?
I can't guarantee with this site there hasn't been any work done on it, but that certainly was what happened at the Heights. And my prediction would be, because it is a golf course in the same general area, probably.
And that's that old golf course in eastern St. Paul.
Northeast corner.
Yeah.
I think, it's speculative, but so it's like, and this is where there's a lot of learning still going on, a lot of analysis still going on for this specific site. But it's something to pay attention to. So we have back here.
Yeah, hi, Jake Anderson. I'm a resident here in Falcon Heights. First of all, congratulations on the geothermal. It's a huge achievement. I'm sure a lot went into it and a lot of pushback and back and forth. I know you received a rather large grant through the state and probably more grants. And, St. Paul is St. Paul. Falcon Heights has 5,000 people in it. Just curious, first of all, and maybe this is a question for Representative Kraft, but what sort of state money would we have to approach a project of that scale in this small community?
Well, a few things. One is geothermal is actually one of the few technologies that survived the gutting of the Inflation Reduction Act that happened at the federal level. So there are still federal dollars available for some of the geothermal projects. I imagine they would look to those as well. We have, depending on when this happens, we have been very interested in investing in geothermal. We put money in for studies and things like that. Whether this could be a bonding project, or something along those lines, or some housing, it's hard to say. But geothermal is still a favored technology federally, and it's something that we've been, very positive on at the state level as well.
Thanks.
Question.
Yeah, just a quick question, I think. Given that it's likely that the top 5 feet of soil will have to be removed, I'm guessing that would help with the geothermal piping laying?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, new construction is an ideal time for geothermal in general, but like if you're tearing up stuff anyway, perfect.
You get a question up here, and then we go back there.
Yeah, I had a question for the representative.
Can you speak up, please?
I had a question for the representative. I know at one time, just 2 years ago or whatever, we were talking about doing away with parking minimums at the state level, and some legislation had been introduced. And do you know where that's at? Or?
Yeah. Everyone hear the question?
Why don't you repeat it?
We've been looking at, a couple of years ago, at doing away with parking minimums statewide. That bill, I think, is still out there. It hasn't passed. I think that's probably a lower likelihood of passing. But that said, within the bill that I'm working on, there is, we've gone to approach that we have a menu of things that cities can do. And so if Some cities want to go down in that direction. That could be one of the ways they satisfy some of the menu items, some of their requirements. Now, the reason why this is of such interest is one of the biggest costs of housing is parking. It's something like $35,000-ish for a parking spot, what it works out to be.
That's right.
And what you see is that when parking minimums are put in, for valid reason, we want to make sure there's enough. It almost always is too much. There's always too much parking. And if you talk to the folks in the city of Minneapolis, when they made a bunch of changes several years ago, they will tell you that the single most impactful thing they did in terms of housing costs was doing away with parking minimums. Doing away with parking minimums doesn't mean that parking doesn't get built. It's just more left for the market to decide, and it has been very successful. So it's one of these very emotional, complex issues because you can look at it at a micro level and say, well, how that could really mess up in this specific area. But at a high level, that's why there's so much interest in it, because it is such a cost and it's generally really overbuilt.
I want to say thank you for I've learned so much already. So thank you, and I love the big ideas. I'm thrilled, Jack, that you're here. I'm disappointed that there isn't more city representation. Since I'm learning so much, it could be that others.
We're taping.
You're taping, great. Hope everybody watches it. Hi, everybody. So Spencer, I think I've got a couple questions for you. And that is, I'm going to repeat your mantra, the density is beautiful, that's great, and I love the visuals. You also said one thing that really sparked my interest, which was, it was creative phasing in the development. And then the parks came first. Wow. And, though, we all saw Highland Park for years with a big chain link metal fence around it, for years as the battle wore on. And it was, at least 5 years before the park came to fruition. Is there a reality where that phasing includes, before the plan is agreed upon? In other words, I'm concerned that as soon as the land is sold on the golf course, there will be a big chain link fence, and they'll probably tear down all the trees as they battle, and then it's going to look like that for 5 years before anything happens. Can that phase be part of the creative planning process?
That's a great question. I'll go back to my optimism thing. Hopefully. There's so many variables. I think there's stuff that can be done to make things more efficient. I think that I'm interested, as you're asking that question, and I was listening to Jack talk about the city's process, and that if the developer purchased it, then they would go through the process to rezone it. I wonder if there's an opportunity for the city to proactively rezone it, or to make it more marketable. And that's just something that can maybe speed up the process. I don't work for the city of Falcon Heights, so I'm not sure.
Are you looking for a job?
No, we've got enough work in St. Paul. But ideally, yes. I mean, it's just tough. There's so many factors, and if the city of Falcon Heights, had the land use in place and the zoning in place to facilitate the sort of development we wanted proactively, and a developer had a funding stack ready to go, it's possible that it could be faster, and ideally would be less red tape than what we had to face in St. Paul, given just the size of the city and the number of players. So I don't think that really helps or gives you a concrete answer, but I don't think we'll know until we have those kind of players in place.
I don't need to go next, but you.
And then my second question there, just really quickly. You mentioned ADUs, and so that's for what's infill for existing. So this is more of a question maybe for Falcon Heights. Are you also considering density in our existing housing areas in terms of allowing ADUs, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so to jump in on that, kind of as the city and our planning commission has been reviewing kind of our, even before the golf course, kind of as the states had the discussion of, kind of the missing middle housing and the other areas, we took a proactive approach as well. We're an urban edge community, as defined kind of the Met Council, first ring suburb. And so we took a lot of those looks at our own zoning code and said, we didn't have ADUs as a use, and so that's been added into our zoning code. Looking at our parking minimums. Our parking minimums, we didn't get down to 0 or no, but we were at 2 parking spaces per unit. We reduced that down to 1. And there were some considerations. We have some challenges. Most of our multifamily is along Larpenteur. Larpenteur has generally no parking. So that's kind of one of our unique challenges. And then the other part too is that the State Fair, the University of Minnesota, we have very seasonal impacted parking. And so that was one of the considerations kind of as we took a look at that, but we did want to reduce it, take kind of some proactive steps to get ahead of some of that, to kind of say, hey, at a city level, we want to look at that regardless of what happens in the state so that we take that approach. So that's something that the city, the planning commission and the city council have worked on.
Okay, thank you. So we've got the 2 more minutes here, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So go ahead, here's the offer.
Hi, I'm Tom Fisher. I live in St. Anthony Park, but I teach urban design at the university, and so I teach Prairie Queen, Spencer. So I'm a strong believer in the missing middle. And however, my center looked at the golf course and the toxicity question, and one of the conclusions we came up to this is that in fact the solution may have to be super density in the places that are not contaminated, which is along Larpenteur and the driving range, and that maybe the best solution is to bioremediate the rest of the landscape and not try to remove all of that soil, because the expense of that removal is enormous, right? And so one thought, which maybe we need to get ready for, is that we're talking about a very dense, very concentrated development, and you let most of the land recover from the mercury poisoning over time. So that's what we're looking at in terms of golf course reuses around the country, is that in fact it's not sort of single family houses everywhere, because the expense of those houses is going to be enormous when you take into account the soil removal. And so we don't think that that's the solution to golf course removal. We think that, and this may be an opportunity for us to show another model. So.
Thanks.
I will say that in the Port Authority's work on the Heights, there may be some science there that I'm aware of and they were unaware of, and in their studies no one was aware of. But there didn't seem to be any feasible way to make that mercury not toxic in any kind of reasonable timeline for people.
Right. To live on it. Right.
Maybe you put solar panels.
Yeah, I mean, it could be other things, right?
I was just going to help address one of the questions. I'm on the planning commission, and the whole thing about phasing the site, it was one of the last things we did at the last joint meeting between the council and the planning commission was to address, pass on to the university as part of their bid to hopefully not fence off the site, to be able to maintain it in an aesthetic looking way. Was one of the last things that we put into the bid that we sent to the U, so hopefully they take that into effect with whoever our partner ends up being in this whole thing.
Great, thank you for adding that.
So I happen to be the forester for Ramsey County Parks. And a lot of people have been talking about the trees on the golf course here, which is awesome. It's super cool if people are really passionate about trees. I will add my 2 cents as a certified arborist that if trees do need to be taken out as part of this project, one of the things we're looking at, with impacts from climate change, our trees, just across Minnesota, are under a lot of stress right now through a wide variety of factors like invasive diseases, with climate change, warming temperatures, variable seasons. And trees just on golf courses in general are just under a ton of stress to begin with. So they might not be the healthiest trees as we're starting out with this project. And because we're in a northern climate, we're already getting animals and plants that are migrating north anyways. So I would encourage the room here to say, like, if we have to remove trees, like, this might not necessarily be a bad thing, because this could be an opportunity for us to re-diversify the canopy within Falcon Heights, and potentially even bring up tree species that are on their way anyways, that could then help the birds, the mammals, the what have yous that are going to be moving up here as the climate warms. I just want to add one more thing. I am one of the youngest people in this room. I cannot afford to purchase a house like at all right now, but I just want to give my appreciation for everyone up here and really being like forward-looking, like the fact that we're talking about like missing middle housing and rezoning and tearing down like parking minimums and ADUs. It makes me really hopeful for potential projects like this in the future. And we're kind of in dark times right now, but I hope to be able to afford homes in this community. So thank you all for the work that you're doing. It really does mean a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here, and here. Yes.
All right.
Yes, you.
Hi, my name is Kyle Huberty. I'm an architect, and I work a lot with developers, doing projects locally in the St. Anthony Park area, as well as in sort of the urban places, as well as suburban and second-tier suburbs, second string. And I've had the opportunity to see, and maybe this is sort of an observation more so from my experience, kind of a tale of two cities, where some of those questions of how long does development need to happen, and how long does this, it has a lot to do with the unified leadership of the cities. And it's, you said there's how many people on the staff? And 10 people. So then, how about you guys aren't busy at all? You got a lot going on. So in terms of like the city needs support, and a lot of, as much as the constituencies around them can be unified in a goal that they can actually execute. I've worked in two areas recently doing significant developments in sort of second string suburbs, so not the same context, but one of them went incredibly fast and incredibly efficient, and it was really all a testament to the leadership in the city and the city council's unit. And they did do its development and the economics of it, and we often see developers as the bad guy coming to Fern Gully, our beautiful forest. But there's an opportunity, I guess, to really kind of build unity around this and actually partner with developers. So in certain communities where I work, we've seen a real desire for a village, and within a village becomes shops and stores and storefronts. And guess who you want is local shops. They don't necessarily want the big chains all the time, and so you want local shops. And then you're asking for local small businesses to really come in and subsidize costs of new construction. And so oftentimes the reality is like retail is hard to fill up right now. So if you dream of a European village where you can walk to a coffee shop, then you gotta ask yourself, do I want to start a coffee shop with their profit margins and new costs of construction rents every month? And guess who carries that cost is actually developers. They put these in there as amenities oftentimes. And the only places I see doing that effectively are using every single cost-saving measure and strategy part. It's like 1,000 little moves can make a meaningful a change. And in the city that we're working in, we're seeing significant retail getting built out. The city is actually like rolling out the red carpet, being like, we want retailers to be in our city because we want a place here which actually invites small businesses to welcome them. So they're doing things like TIF districts. They're doing things like subsidies for that. And the city has had a lot of coaching to be able to help make these decisions. And it's, the quest is developer come and pay your way, but actually the city is allowing a developer to come there and not just do luxury high-end housing. They're doing sweet opportunities for shops to come in. But that's through the support of the city. The other cities you see said, you figured out your own way, developers. And guess what they're doing? They're only talking to the top dollar paying retailers who aren't your small shops, who aren't your local business owners, because they can only have to do work with the highest prices. So as I'm seeing that one is taking a lot longer because there's a lot more arguments going on behind the scenes, the one where the city's more unified, they're actually getting this stuff done, and they're getting interested parties who can afford the rents. And it's really cool to see that, the speed that's happening, and it's a hope that you can learn from those lessons too as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, great comments. Any response? So I know we're at time here, so I'm going to go a little bit over if that's okay. So we have one question here and one question here. So
I'll just keep it short. Peter Lindstrom, I used to sit up there as former mayor here. I'm currently on the Metropolitan Council, where we work on density, transit, and a lot of other important things. To the point about the 10 city staff, our community development coordinator is also our backyard chicken inspector and bee inspector. I know that because she's been in my backyard inspecting both. And so that goes to the point of really great consultants on this project and great planning commissioners. And I also want to say the other tie-in, besides what Jack was saying about the underlying zoning being put into place, is the tax increment financing, or the other planning tool, the planned unit development, which sometimes happens. If the developer is asking for these incentives, that's where the city can say, okay, well, we want some electric vehicle charging infrastructure for the public. We would like to see what this site looks like for trails and parks, and for other sustainability and amenities that we've been talking about. That's another critical tie-in. That's it.
Thank you.
I would just add, that point from my St. Louis Park days, we used TIF quite a lot, but it was always tied to either affordability or green features or both.
I really don't want to be the last speaker.
Sure, more after you then.
Well, so because I'm going to be a typical academic, and I've got more of a comment than a question. But I'm going to own that. So, but I'm hearing a lot of really good things tonight. I'm hearing a lot of things. I wasn't sure what I was going to hear when I came up here. I'm sorry. I'm Brian Martinson. I'm a St. Paul resident. I serve on the Planning Commission. I work with Spencer. And I also sustain St. Paul, and I work at the TAB on Met Council and a variety of things. But what I wanted to talk about Highland Bridge and why it took 10 years. And why we had that fence up for 10 years was because there was in part. And I think Bill Lindicky can probably speak to this as well if he wants to. He's hiding in the back there, by the way. Why it took so long in part was because there was a really well-organized group of neighbors who wanted nothing but single-family houses. And there was some concern about the view shed with the Mississippi, but I don't think that was the bigger concern. And because they organized and fought so much, that's why it took so damn long to get anything built down there. And so let's not repeat that. If you don't want fences up for 10 years around Falcon Heights, get yourselves organized so that you don't have the NIMBYs running the show. And so what I'm hearing tonight is, I don't think you maybe have the same problem that I was worried about existing here. And I'm really excited about that. So congratulations. Keep it up.
But you're denying the rent control matter.
What about
We're not ready for that.
No, that was
way before that.
Rent control made St. Paul unsustainable.
No,
That was way
we agree
before
to get into the rent control. There's going to be big disagreements about it.
We'll get into that after. Hit the bar. So, any last, since Brian's going to be last, any last comments? I know we're over time. This has been a fantastic. Thank you, panel, so much. Really awesome questions, really awesome conversations. Thank you, Pat Thompson. This was Pat's idea. Thank you, Pat, and Transition Town Hall St. Anthony Park. Thank you to Stay in St. Paul for co-sponsoring as well.
Thank you, Jack, for being
Thank you,
here.
and thank you, the City of Falcon Heights, for Jack for being here. So yeah, this has just been a fantastic event. Thank you for coming out on a super cold night and super hard times. Please be safe this evening and be safe this coming weekend. And really, I'm looking forward to what happens here as a resident nearby. I'm looking forward to being up here and looking at the house again.